Yo, what's good, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy podcast. My name is Tyler Anderson. I am your host. The date is September 17th, 2024. This is episode 15. And in this episode, we are going to be talking about week 2 of the 2024 NFL season and all of the fantasy football fallout from week 2. If you're like any other person playing fantasy football this year, you are probably dealing with injuries. So we have some stuff to talk about in that regard. But most importantly, we're just going to go over all the news that's happened lately and just recap each game of week 2 one by one and talk about what it means for fantasy football. But before we get into the week 2 discussion, please make sure to follow or listen wherever you are watching. If you are on YouTube, or if you can like the episode wherever you are listening or watching, please make sure to drop a like. If you want the video for the podcast, you can head over to the Fantasy Football Prodigy YouTube channel. And without further ado, let's get right into the news. I guess we'll just kind of talk about mostly injuries, because that's pretty much what's going on here lately. DeForest Buckner on injured reserve with an ankle injury. Defensive player, but still somewhat matters in terms of matchups. But Tua suffered that concussion on Thursday Night Football against the Bills. Looked really bad. Has a big history with concussions, and he is going to be put on injured reserve. So hopefully he gets better. He says he has no plans to retire. A lot of people say he should, just for his own health, but not surprisingly, he is going to keep playing. Isaiah Pacheco dealing with an injury, going to be out for quite some time. Probably going to miss most of October. I think I heard it was like 6-ish weeks, maybe 6 to 8 weeks. I think the injury was last I heard. So the Chiefs are signing Kansas City Chiefs former running back Kareem Hunt to the practice squad. Obviously, you know, he is not the same player that he once was. But Kareem Hunt is going to be on the practice squad for the Chiefs. Not probably going to play this week, but, you know, throughout this injury stint, he might work his way in. Carson Steele is also there. It's going to be a little bit ugly, in my opinion. They also signed Samaje Perine before the season. He'll probably be in the pass catching role. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is also on the roster, but he's injured at the moment. So, you know, some of these guys are worth adding on waivers. If you're in a PPR league, I think Perine is probably the safer bet to be the flex option if he's in the pass catching role. Carson Steele probably has a better chance of being a notable difference maker in general if he gets good work on the ground and maybe catches some passes. But I do think this will be a committee, and this might just be an improvement for Mahomes' numbers, because Pacheco was he was the guy. He was getting a ton of volume, and it sucks that he got hurt, but when he comes back, he'll be a top fantasy option again, because he was looking really good. But moving on with the news, Justin Fields, the Steelers are preparing to start Justin Fields in week 3. Russell Wilson still dealing with that calf injury. You know, if the Steelers were 0-2, who knows if maybe they would rush Wilson back, but they're 2-0 with Fields. Not that he's, you know, lit the world on fire for fantasy or anything, but you know, he's done enough to not lose them the games because their defense is really good. Moving on with the rest of the news, AJ Brown says, the player himself says, he will be out a couple weeks. We don't super know what that means at the time of recording. Again, this is September 17th, 2024 that I'm recording this. But you know, he didn't play Monday night for Monday Night Football. Luckily, they reported that he was out before the Sunday game started, so you were able to pivot and put him on injured reserve if you can put out players on your IR. But he's probably going to miss at least another game, maybe another one after that. I don't know if this comment included the Monday night game or if he means a couple more. But hopefully it's just this upcoming week 3, and then he'll be back. But in the meantime, Devontae Smith is going to be even better than he normally is. He always shows up when AJ Brown is gone, and he did that against the Falcons. We'll talk about that later. Then theoretically, Dallas Goedert should be better, but he did not do much against the Falcons. So Goddard is looking like a guy that you probably don't want to play unless you're desperate. Another receiver going to miss a few weeks, Deebo Samuel. I have him in a few leagues, and if you're listening, you're going to have to be prepared to pivot. This could increase the target consolidation for Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle, just because usually they game plan around one player, and that one player usually goes off while the others, they might have good games too, but in the case where, there's no McCaffrey, there's no Debo, their top two options are now Kittle and Ayuk, as well as, Jordan Mason out of the backfield is still going to be a smash play. But this team is missing players. Brock Purdy might suffer a little bit, but Ayuk has gotten off to a slow start after dealing with that contract situation. Just hasn't looked quite in sync. My Minnesota Vikings just beat them. But you know what? Moving forward, Ayuk is probably going to be a good play. And Kittle, without Debo, should be able to pick up the slack a little bit. So also important to note, Jawan Jennings, another receiver for the 49ers, is probably worth a pickup in deeper leagues because he should get some target volume with Debo being out. Cooper Kupp, gonna miss some time. I think did he get put on IR officially? I thought he did. Likely headed to IR. Could go on IR. Okay. I thought I maybe saw that he was on IR already, but either way, he's gonna miss some time. Those are the main pieces of news. Also, Bryce Young benched for Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton is a veteran of the game. I think this is a good thing for the Panthers offense. Any hope for Bryce Young's future is probably, more or less it's gone. I don't really know how to judge the team around him. I'm not going to say it's great, but they did bring in some weapons to try to help him out, and he just hasn't looked good. I think the situation in Carolina isn't great, but he really hasn't flashed any potential at all, really. And I think for fantasy purposes, Andy Dalton is definitely an improvement for those pass catching options. Deontay Johnson mainly, but if Xavier Legette were to have a breakout rookie campaign, it probably wasn't going to happen with Bryce Young. Now he has a guy who can at least get him the ball. Adam Thielen is still there. So we'll see if someone emerges as a pass catcher in this offense, and we'll see who Andy Dalton really likes to, throw the ball to. Dolphins signed Tyler Huntley off the Ravens practice squad. I believe he's a Pro Bowler, technically. I think he played in a Pro Bowl one year because a lot of people just didn't play. But, that's something with Tua out, with that concussion on injured reserve. So the quarterbacks on the Dolphins depth chart now are Skylar Thompson and Tyler Huntley. I would assume Skylar would start, this week and probably moving forward, but Tyler Huntley might get in there once he's acclimated and if Skylar looks bad. But yeah, in the meantime, not great for the offense. Achane will probably be fine just because he's so explosive and he'll probably get targets close to the line of scrimmage. Tyreek Hill, it's probably lowers the ceiling a little bit just because the quarterback play isn't going to be as good as Tua. But, Jalen Waddle, I'm a little worried about, but Hill and Achane they're probably good enough where they can still be really great for fantasy. Even without Tua, but definitely not ideal. I'm kind of scrolling through the news here. I think those are pretty much the main pieces of news here. We can hop right into actually getting into each individual game and just breaking those down. We're just going to start with the Thursday night football game. We're going to start with the Bills and the Dolphins on Thursday Night Football. The Bills defeated the Dolphins in Miami 31-10. And if anyone's watching the video and you see me like randomly open my mouth, like drop my jaw, my ears have been popping for like 5 days straight. I don't know why. I do have a bit of a cold. I don't know what's going on, but for my video people, that's why I'm doing that. It's pretty cool. But anyways, back to what I was saying. The Buffalo Bills took down the Dolphins 31-10. It was an absolute blowout. Not close. Josh Allen did not have a good game for fantasy at all. He was the quarterback. Where is he here? He's so far down the list. He was the quarterback 28. He had less than 10 fantasy points with 9.8 according to Fantasy Pros scoring. They just didn't need him to do much, really. He had one touchdown pass, 13 of 19, 139 yards, but not needed in a game that was a blowout. James Cook had 3 total touchdowns. He was 11 for 78 on the ground with 2 rushing touchdowns. Also caught 1 pass for 17 yards and took that into the end zone. So, Cook got in the end zone a couple times, which he doesn't normally do. That's encouraging because that was always the reason that he was not like a first round pick type of player. Is they would, give the ball to Latavius Murray or Josh Allen would be running him in. If he's going to get, touchdowns and goal line work, that is huge. And I believe the Bills also had a pick 6. So there really was no need for Josh Allen to really air it out or anything. Ray Davis also had 9 carries for 29 yards. Obviously this was a blowout, so he, probably got a little more work than he otherwise would have if it was a close game. But nice little handcuff there for James Cook. And then in the receiving game, Keon Coleman, wow, he did nothing. He had no catches, no yards, 1 target. Same stat line for MVS and Mac Hollins. Exactly the same, 0-0 and 1 target. Curtis Samuel had 3 targets, caught one of them for... No, he had 2 targets, caught one of them for 3 yards. Dalton Kincaid, another disappointing week, 4 for 33 on 4 targets. Ty Johnson had 1 for 33, and then Khalil Shakir was the leading receiver, 5 targets, caught them all for 54. So hard to make too many judgments here just because they weren't needed to air it out. But, I thought Keon Coleman showed some promise in week 1. Week 2, it was a little disappointing, but geez, I'm dying over here. I just ate too many pizza rolls. My body's attacking me. But wasn't really needed in week 2. And same with Dalton Kincaid. I'm not saying I think Dalton Kincaid is going to turn around and be a league-winning tight end, but I do think he is better than what we have seen thus far. And if someone is panicking and is willing to trade him away on the super cheap, I think it's worth floating out an offer just to see kind of what you can get him for. But for the Dolphins, not a great game for Tua for fantasy. 145 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, and then he left it in the 4th quarter with that injury. And then in the rushing game, a lot was made of, Raheem Mostert's out, Achane is questionable, and then he was ultimately made active. But, people were wondering, do I play Jalen Wright? Do I play Jeff Wilson? Is Achane active but not going to see the workload? Well, Achane was the whole backfield, especially because Jeff Wilson did leave that game early with an injury, but Achane went 22 for 96 on the ground. Also added 7 for 69 and a touchdown through the air on 7 targets. You love that. And then it was a bit of a disappointing game for... Oh, and just to add to, Jeff Wilson, 2 for 12 through the air before he left with that injury. And then rookie Jalen Wright saw 5 carries, had 4 yards on the ground. So Achane was really the only guy you wanted to play there. Tyreek Hill did not do much for fantasy. He was... Where's his receiving line here? He was... Whoa, my website is freaking out here. Tyreek Hill, 3 for 24 through the air. He did add 1 carry for 12 yards. Jalen Waddle, 4 for 41 through the air. Had 1 carry for 4 yards. So Tyreek Hill had 1 for 12. Jalen Waddle, 1 for 4 on the ground. But yeah, both were pretty disappointing for fantasy. But yeah, the really only great play for the Dolphins was Devon Achane, who was the running back 3 on the week with 26 points in half PPR. And yeah, it's going to be, we'll see how, the Dolphins fare without Tua, but obviously that is a bit of a downgrade. We're going to move on to the Sunday noon games. We're going to start with the Saints taking on the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas. And this was a slaughter, but not the way a lot of people thought. The Saints destroyed the Dallas Cowboys 44-19. A week after looking incredible. Their offense is just on fire. It's a complete 180 from last year where the Saints looked terrible. Week 1, they scored 47 points against the Panthers. You might have thought, well, the Panthers are arguably the worst team in the league. Let's give them a real test. On the road in Dallas against a supposed Super Bowl contender, and they just blew them out 44-19. Derek Carr is playing great. He was 11 of 16, 243 and 2 with 1 pick. He didn't even need to, he didn't need to do much for fantasy. I'm sure he, would have had a better week for fantasy if he was needed, but he was the quarterback 3 on the week. And even in a blowout, because he did also add a 1-yard rushing touchdown, which definitely helped. But speaking of rushing touchdowns, Alvin Kamara had 4 total touchdowns. He was 20 for 115 on the ground, 3 rushing touchdowns, and then he also added 2 receptions on 3 targets for 65 yards and a touchdown. He had a long 57-yard touchdown. I mean, he could have had, 5 touchdowns, but they decided to go with the quarterback sneak with Derek Carr there. And I just got to show you guys here, I did actually overcome the Alvin Kamara 40 burger. I do have him in some leagues, but I won where I had him, I think. But in this league where I was going against him, as you can see, this is my opponent. He had 42. And this is a non-PPR league, but I was able to overcome the 42-point insane game from Alvin Kamara, which I actually won by a little over 10 points, which is kind of unbelievable. But some guys showed up for me big time. So shout out to my my fantasy squad on my main league. It's like an 11-year league, but if you had Kamara, you probably won unless you were my opponent. And if you played against him, you probably lost unless you're as great at fantasy as me. And you know what? That's why you're listening, because you want to become a fantasy football prodigy just like me. So make sure to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. W promo. But yep, Kamara stole the show. Taysom Hill left early with an injury. I had to play him at tight end with a Njoku injury, and obviously that did not go well. But by all accounts, it's nothing serious from what I've heard from reports. And then Rashid Shaheed had another big game. 4 for 96 and 1 through the air, got in the end zone, and then 3 for 13 on the ground. Chris Olave had a solid game, 4 for 81 on 6 targets, added 1 for 7 on the ground. But other than that, the only other person than Shaheed, Kamara, Olave to catch a pass was Taysom Hill. Those were the only people on the Saints to actually have a reception. So pretty wild. In terms of fantasy finish, Rashid Shaheed was the wide receiver 10 on the week, and then Chris Olave was the wide receiver 26, and then needless to say, Alvin Kamara was the running back 1 in all formats. He had 43 points in half PPR. And then for the Cowboys, definitely a disappointing game for Dak Prescott here. At home, 293 and 1 touchdown, had 2 interceptions, added 12 yards on the ground on a couple carries. And according to Fantasy Pros, he was the quarterback 15 on the week, so a little disappointing. About 15 fantasy points, a little under that. Rico Dowdle, I believe he got the start in this game. He went 7 for 30. Zeke was 6 for 16. Zeke also had a really cool 15-yard catch. He had a 2 for 16 through the air. But I don't know who's going to be the one to roster here. Deuce Vaughn was also involved, 4 for 11, 1 for 6 through the air. But this was a blowout, and I think in most games, like when the Cowboys are winning, I think Zeke is probably going to be the guy. Maybe Rico Dowdle if he becomes kind of like the bruising clock chewer guy. But this was just a bad game script for the Cowboys offense, like in terms of the running game in general, and just the offense as a whole. They just did not play well. In the receiving game, CeeDee Lamb saw 7 targets, went 4 for 90 through the air, caught a touchdown, long of 65. Jalen Tolbert, maybe a name to monitor. He had 9 targets, 6 for 82. No Jake Ferguson in this one. Luke Schoonmaker saw 6 targets, caught him all for 43 yards. Rico Dowdle caught 4 for 29. Brandon Cooks 2 for 19. So yeah, just kind of a game to forget for the Cowboys. I don't want to overreact and say their offense is terrible, but I didn't really know that was in the range of outcomes, is getting blown out by the Saints. But the NFL is a crazy, crazy league, and who knows, the Saints might be just a good team. Things change very quickly. They got a new offensive coordinator. They got Kubiak in the house. People are going on and on about all this motion, how their offense is like completely different. And hey, man, it's working. They're using Rashid Shaheed really well. So the Saints are looking really good. And they get to take on the Eagles in week 3, who their defense looks terrible. But yeah, moving on to the next game, we got the Tampa Bay Bucks against the Detroit Lions in Detroit. And the Buccaneers do get the win over the Detroit Lions, 20-16. Baker Mayfield had 185 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. He was the quarterback 5 on the week, mostly because he also did add a rushing touchdown on the ground. 5 for 34 on the ground and 1 touchdown. Quarterback 5 according to Fantasy Pro scoring. Rashad White, 10 for 18. 1 catch for 5 yards. Did he leave? I thought I heard he left that game early. Now, I do have the NFL Red Zone, and I do try to monitor all the games as they're happening, but obviously, it can be a little tough to, know every little play that's happening in every game, but I thought Rashad White left that game early. I'm looking at his snap counts here. So he played, let's see, he played 34 offensive snaps, 71% of the snaps. So he was out there for quite a bit. I'm not exactly sure when the injury occurred, but I do know that he was dealing with an injury. But still just a disappointing line if you played him. He's such a good pass catcher, so 1 for 5 is not what you were hoping for out of Rashad White there. Bucky Irving, the backup, 7 for 22 on the ground. In the passing game, Chris Godwin had himself a really, really great performance. He was one of my starts of the week. I think he was. I made him a start of the week, right? Pretty sure I did. In weeks 1 and 2, I think I did. Did I really do that? Am I smart? Hey, I was calling for the Godwin bounce back, and so far, so good. But he was the wide receiver 8 on the week, 7 for 117 through the air, caught a touchdown, had 8 targets. Mike Evans, a bit of a disappointment. Saw 6 targets, only turned into 3 for 42 and no touchdowns, but don't overreact. You're not going to go away from Mike Evans. Every receiver for the most part has bad games. And especially a guy like Evans, who's a little more touchdown dependent than a lot of the top receivers. Don't overreact and just keep putting him in your lineup. But I don't know if this is an overreaction to say Jared Goff might not be as viable for fantasy as we thought, but 2 games in a row at home in a dome, and he's disappointed in both. Week 1 against the Rams, not good, and then same in week 2 at home against the Bucs defense. He threw the ball 55 times, had 307 yards, but no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Was a quarterback 25 on the week. Jahmyr Gibbs, 13 for 84 on the ground, had 7 targets, caught all of them for 22 yards. So you still get points for that in PPR leagues, but if you're catching 7 passes, you'd hope it'd amount to more. But brighter days are ahead. But still an okay game. I mean, that's like I feel like it's a pretty pedestrian game for Gibbs. He was the running back 16 on the week. David Montgomery, 11 for 35, another rushing touchdown, just like last week that he got in overtime. Montgomery also caught 4 for 35 on the week. It looks like David Montgomery was the running back 13, so both of those guys were kind of higher end mid running back 2s. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I hope you guys did not overreact to week 1's terrible performance where he completely disappeared, but week 2, vintage Amon-Ra was back. He had 19 targets, caught 11 of them for 119. No touchdown or anything, but you'll definitely take that out of Amon-Ra. Yeah, he's a stud. He was the running back 13 on the week. That just shows how important touchdowns can be, but still, that great performance. But yeah, wide receiver 13.5 PPR, gets 17.4 points. And then Jamison Williams, back-to-back good games. If you took him late in your draft, congratulations. You have yourself a receiver that you can probably play in the right matchups here. Saw 11 targets, caught 5 for 79. He was drafted super high, and he had the whole gambling suspension. He's dealt with injuries. But there was reason to doubt if his career would work out. But so far, 2 weeks into the year, he looks like a great late round pick if you took the shot on him. I didn't get him anywhere, so I wish I had, but a lot of people had that same idea of taking him late. Just number 2 wide receiver for a good offense. And then Sam Laporta, another kind of disappointing week. 3 targets only, 2 for 13. Oh, shout out Tim Patrick. He got in there, caught 2 for 12, by the way. Shout out Tim Patrick. But yeah, Laporta, I mean, obviously, if you drafted him, you're going to keep starting him, but definitely not meeting expectations. And I wasn't really a fan of drafting Laporta super early just because, a lot of his production last year and his rookie year, he was great, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of touchdowns and those can come and go. But, I think he'll play better moving forward, but so far that he's not been a good draft pick. Moving on, because what did he do in week 1? Let me pull up his stats here. Yeah, in week 1 he was 4 for 45. So, not what you spent all that draft capital on. But moving on to the next game here, Packers Colts. Packers without Jordan Love still took down the Indianapolis Colts 16-10 at home. Malik Willis got the start. He was 12 of 14, 122, 1 touchdown. Was that his first ever touchdown? I'm looking this up. Malik Willis career stats. That was his only touchdown in his career. His first and only touchdown. Shout out Malik Willis. I mean, I'm a Vikings fan, so not really, but shout out Malik Willis. Josh Jacobs, holy moly, he carried the load in this one. He saw 32 carries on the ground, turned into 151 yards, didn't get in the end zone. And it also looks like he didn't add anything through the air. So even on 32 carries, he was still only the running back 22, but he had 13.1 points in half PPR. You'll definitely take that. And I guess, I don't normally highlight non-PPR, but when a guy has 32 carries and no catches, it's worth shouting out. He was the running back 15 in non-PPR leagues, running back 22 in half PPR. You know what? Let's just do the trifecta. Full PPR, running back 23. Interesting. Okay, so yeah, Jacobs, there was some skepticism about his efficiency at the end of his time there with the Raiders, and the Packers kind of maybe wanting to use a committee, but at least in the meantime, just with all the injuries they have to that backfield, Jacobs is the guy. Emmanuel Wilson should be the backup there now that Marshawn Lloyd got put on injured reserve. AJ Dillon was on IR before the season, so Wilson might be someone worth picking up as a handcuff there. Malik Willis also did add 6 for 41 on the ground for what it's worth. But yeah, and then Lloyd 6 for 15 on the ground, and then caught 1 for 3. Emmanuel Wilson 5 for 9 on the ground. Jaden Reed, week 1's wide receiver 1, definitely came back down to earth a little bit. Without Jordan Love and without that crappy field in Brazil, wide receiver 1 was going to be tough to replicate, but I forced him into one of my lineups. I sat him in another where I have a pretty good team, and sitting him was probably the right decision. He had 5.6 points in half PPR, wide receiver 48. Only 2 targets, caught them both for 9 yards, and then added 2 for 37 on the ground. Had a 22-yard run in there. So 22 and 15-yard runs. That's what ultimately made him not completely devastating, but as long as Jordan Love is out, they're going to limit the pass attempts. Willis only threw the ball 14 times. Romeo Dobbs, 3 for 62 on 3 targets. Wicks, 3 for 26 on 4 targets. But yeah, the passing game was not really to be messed with. And then Anthony Richardson had himself a really, really bad game for fantasy and real life. 17 of 34, 204 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 picks. Only had 4 for 37 on the ground. Anthony Richardson was not being drafted in fantasy for his passing game. It's for his rushing. So if he's only doing 4 for 37 on the ground, that's not what you want. Anthony Richardson was the quarterback 21 on the week. And who was 1 spot ahead of him? Malik Willis, quarterback 20, according to Fantasy Pros fantasy finishes over there. Jonathan Taylor had himself a solid little game for fantasy, 12 for 103 on the ground. He also added 2 receptions for 32 yards on 4 targets. In half PPR, Jonathan Taylor was the running back 14 on the week. A spot that he'll probably live. I think he's always probably going to be like a mid running back 1 to mid running back 2, just because probably not going to catch a lot of passes, and Richardson might run some touchdowns in, but he's probably a guy that is going to be a solid play most weeks. Alec Pierce, another really good week. I would not be chasing Alec Pierce's production. He was the wide receiver 19 on the week, 5 for 56 and a touchdown. Just because the passing volume, I don't know if it's going to be there. And even if he threw the ball 34 times, that's not terrible, but 17 completions. I just don't know if he can consistently get the ball to his receivers. And he's just hit Pierce on a couple deep shots here, which that's Pierce's game, is going deep. He's a deep threat guy. And, he might have his games here and there, but not a guy that I want to rely on every week because you probably have better options that are going to be more consistent. If you're in a deep league, sure. I mean, but yeah, not good for the receivers. Adonai Mitchell, 4 targets, caught one of them. Luckily, went for 30 yards, but Moali Cox, 1 for 22. Michael Pittman, I'm worried about him. He had 7 targets, 3 for 21. It turned into, and yeah, just this passing game is a little bit concerning at this point. But you're probably going to be playing Richardson most weeks. But he does have the potential to not have good games, as we just saw. It's not going to be sunshine and rainbows every week for him. Next game, New York Jets travel to Tennessee, where they defeated the Titans 24-17. The Jets are now 1-1. Titans 0-2. Aaron Rodgers had himself, a solid little game. It's kind of cool to see him actually, playing football with his Achilles intact. He was a quarterback 1, according to Fantasy Pros scoring, quarterback 12 on the week, 18 of 30, 176 and 2 touchdowns, no picks. Breece Hall, 14 for 62 on the ground. He had 8 targets, turned into 7 for 52 through the air, finished as the running back 7 on the week. And hey, that was great, but it could have been even better because his teammate Braylon Allen was the running back 6 on the week, 1 spot ahead of him. Breece Hall had 17.4 points. Braylon Allen had 17.6 in half PPR. Braylon Allen had 7 carries, 33 and a touchdown on the ground. He also saw 4 targets, caught 2 of them for 23 yards and a touchdown. So both of them with a receiving touchdown. Braylon Allen got the rushing touchdown. Interesting usage there. I kind of thought of Braylon Allen as just a handcuff, and that's probably what it's best to view him as. But he looks really good. He was a really good college player, and he just went a little bit later in the draft than a lot of people thought. But he might have some sort of value as a flex play, for bye weeks and injuries and stuff, because there's a lot of injuries. But he's not gonna, threaten Breece Hall's running back 1 overall potential. But as a Breece Hall manager, I'm sure that was frustrating to see the backup get a couple touchdowns there. So sometimes that just happens, but Braylon Allen's one of the better handcuffs to have in the NFL, which is the backup running back to a clear starter. In case you're not familiar with the handcuff term, just if the starter goes down, the handcuff running back becomes valuable. Like if Breece Hall went down today or tomorrow, knock on wood here, not that I have him in any leagues, but just for fantasy goodness overall, if he were to go down, Braylon Allen would be the number 1 pickup of the week. People would be spending all their fab, burning their priorities. So definitely a guy that should be on rosters. And then Garrett Wilson, 4 for 57 through the air. Saw 6 targets. Didn't amount to much, but and actually, I would like to amend what I said a second ago. I was looking at non-PPR scoring. Breece Hall was actually the running back 4 in half PPR, which is the scoring I like to go off of. And then Braylon Allen was the running back 7 with 18.6, Breece Hall with 20.9. So in non-PPR, Braylon Allen was the higher scoring running back, but in half PPR, Breece Hall was the leader there. Just to clarify, Garrett Wilson, you're not going to go away from him. 8.2 points in half PPR, 4 for 57, added 1 carry for 5 yards. But, receivers aren't going to be great every week. Mike Williams kind of worked his way back a little bit. Actually saw a target in this one. He'll get more snaps as, things, as time passes. But someone you're not putting in your lineups right now. 1 target, caught it for 19 yards. Tyler Conklin, disappointed at tight end again. 2 targets, caught 1 for 10. And then Alan Lazard, after a big week 1, saw 4 targets, only turned into 2 for 11. For the Titans, Will Levis, 19 for 28, 192, had 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Also added 38 rushing yards on 4 carries. On the ground, Tony Pollard had himself another really, really solid game. 17 for 66 on the ground. 17 for 62 on the ground. Added 5 for 40 through the air on 6 targets. 12.7 points in half PPR was the running back 23. And then Tajay Spears seems to be the clear backup. He did hurt his ankle, it looks like. He had an ankle injury. Doesn't look to be serious, but looks like Pollard is the clear starter there. Spears finished with 6 for 20 on the ground. 2 for 11 through the air. For the receiving game, Calvin Ridley had himself a heck of a performance. I didn't play him in the league where I had him just because, against the Jets, I just felt like I had better options in a league or two where I have him. But he finished as the wide receiver 5 on the week, had 6 targets, went 4 for 77 and a touchdown. He had a crazy, crazy grab on a long bomb touchdown. Super low probability of catching it. He came down with it. And then he also added 1 carry for 10 yards and a touchdown. So that propelled him to wide receiver 5 on the week, 22.7 points in half PPR. Great to see him flash because I was pretty high on him in the draft season. I thought he was a little undervalued, so really great to see him have a good game there. Tyler Boyd, 2 for 26, had 5 targets, and Hopkins only 1 for 9 through the air. Only had a couple targets there. And let me pull up his, let's see. I'm trying to get these snap percentages here for Hopkins. So DeAndre, dude, this website keeps refreshing and it like takes me back when I'm like looking at it. Okay. DeAndre Hopkins only played 44% of snaps. That was kind of his thing last week is he did not play a ton of snaps. He was coming off an injury. He's a little bit older. I think as the season goes along, we'll see more of him, but as he comes back from that injury, and Tyler Boyd, they signed in free agency. So they have Boyd, they have Ridley, they have Hopkins. There's really no need to maybe rush Hopkins out there when he's recovering from that injury. Traylon Burks actually played a higher percentage of snaps. So yeah, that's definitely something to monitor moving forward because I think, I don't think he's a bad player, even though he is older. I just think, we're seeing him be worked in. Whereas Calvin Ridley played 82% of the snaps. And then also, since we're looking at snap percentage here, Tony Pollard played 67% of the snaps there. So the clear starter there. Spears played 33. And again, I don't know if he left that game early with injury or if that was just a split, but I think we spent enough time on that game. Let's move on to the 49ers and Vikings. That's the one I'm looking forward to talking about here. My Vikings, they made it interesting, but they defeated the San Francisco 49ers 23-17 at home. My Vikings are now 2-0, 49ers 1-1. Sam Darnold, dude. Hey, man. A lot of people are saying he's this year's Baker Mayfield, and I will definitely take that. He's a quarterback 4 on the week for fantasy. Just over 20 points, 17 of 26 through the air, 268 yards, a couple passing touchdowns, 1 pick. Hit a 97-yard bomb to Justin Jefferson, who finished 4 for 133 and a touchdown on 7 targets. In the receiving game, since we're talking about that, there was no Jordan Addison, no Hawkinson. Jefferson left that game early with an injury, and Darnold still just led some drives at the end of that game. Had some crazy third down conversions, but Jalen Naylor, a guy to keep an eye on. If depending on injuries, a lot of people are banged up right now, but he's the wide receiver 3 there. Could be elevated with injuries. 3 for 54 and a touchdown through the air. Saw 4 targets. Trent Sherfield caught a target. Brandon Powell had a couple catches for 16 yards. Johnny Munt 2 for 12. And then in the rushing game, Aaron Jones, a little bit of a disappointment. 9 for 32 on the ground. Did see 6 targets, caught 5 of them for 36 yards. And Ty Chandler, he looked. I was watching this game in its entirety, obviously, because I'm a Vikings fan. He looked really good. 10 for 82. He was ripping off some chunk runs there. He had a 25-yard run. But yeah, he was 10 for 82 on the ground. And Aaron Jones is older and he often deals with injuries. So Chandler is a guy that's he's a good handcuff, but he might also have some good value if you're in like a deeper league. A guy that can see 10 targets on any given week. You could do worse. And Darnold also added 32 rushing yards in this game on 5 carries. So yeah, that was an awesome performance for the Vikings. They definitely are exceeding my expectations. I mean, I'm usually overly optimistic, but this year I was a little worried. But with Darnold playing well and that defense looking really strong so far, I mean, there's room for optimism and for my heart to get broken. Vikings fans, But Jefferson finished as a wide receiver 7 on the week, 21.3 points in half PPR. There was some concern about the quarterback change with Justin Jefferson, but so far he's still been good. He's such a good player that, Darnold might just be good enough to support Justin Jefferson. Brock Purdy on the other side, he finished with 319 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, threw it 36 times, completed 28 passes. He was a quarterback 13 on the week. Pretty solid. Added 12 rushing yards on a couple carries. Jordan Mason in replacement of Christian McCaffrey, 20 for 100 exactly on the ground. Had a rushing touchdown. Had one target, caught it for 4 yards. So he's going to be the workhorse. Garendo got in there, got one carry, 0 yards. I mean, you know, I dropped Jordan Mason in the offseason. I've said this before. If you've heard it, I apologize. But I dropped Raheem Mostert when he was like the third or fourth running back on the 49ers, and then he became a kind of a stud. I dropped Jordan Mason because he was behind McCaffrey. He was behind Elijah Mitchell, and then they drafted Garendo. I picked up Garendo, put him on my taxi squad in Dynasty. I drafted Jordan Mason because I'm like, you know what? He's probably fourth on the depth chart, but no. McCaffrey and Mitchell both hurt. Garendo not relevant. So Mason's the guy, and as long as McCaffrey's out, he's gonna be an every week running back one. So that would be cool for my dynasty team to have him. You know, I lost by less than a couple points this week. We'll talk about that later. I guess I'm crazy to show you guys, but yeah, Mason's a great play. Deebo Samuel 8 for 110 on the ground or in the air. He had 2 carries. Negative 10 yards on the ground, so that did not work out for him. You know, with McCaffrey out, you would hope he'd have a little more rushing production, but 8 for 110 through the air on 10 targets is huge. He did get hurt in this game. He's going to miss some time, going to miss a few weeks here. Hopefully he avoids IR, but that's definitely a bummer for fantasy. George Kittle, 8 targets, caught 7 of them for 76 yards and a touchdown. I remember I was at a Vikings game when Kittle, right before Kittle broke out, and I was watching this guy. I'm like, this guy looks really good. And I traded like basically nothing for him in Dynasty, and I got George Kittle, and then he broke out. That was like the one good Dynasty trade I made. I know I complain a lot about me messing up in Dynasty, but that was a good trade I made. Ayuk still kind of getting back in the rhythm here. You know, he was dealing with that contract situation over the offseason, but 4 for 43, had 5 targets. With Deebo out, like I said at the beginning, Kittle and Ayuk I think are even safer plays. Juwan Jennings, another guy that should have an increased role. Saw 4 targets, caught 2 for 37. And Chris Conley got in there. 1 target, 4 yards. Caught it for 4 yards. Skull Vikings, baby. All right. There were a lot of noon games here this week. I don't know why they did it that way, but it's kind of annoying. But Seahawks and Patriots in New England went to overtime. The Seahawks got the win 23-20. Geno Smith, 33 of 44. Can I go? Let me go back for 1 second, listeners. I probably should have given the 49ers players some credit here, by the way, before we move on to that Patriots game I just introduced. I just like to let you guys know where people finished when it's notable. Jordan Mason was the running back 8 on the week and half PPR. Deebo Samuel finished as the wide receiver 20 on the week, and then George Kittle was the tight end 1 on the week with 17.1 points. Okay. Anyways, back to the Seahawks and Patriots. Geno Smith, 33 of 44, 327 and 1 touchdown. He's looking like a nice little streaming option. Last year was a little rough. A couple years ago looked good. Like I said, I think we're going to meet somewhere in the middle. I think their offense will look better. And he was a quarterback 7 on the week. You know, I in my main league that I showed you earlier, where I overcame the Alvin Kamara 40 burger. I drafted Trevor Lawrence as my only quarterback, just because I kept getting sniped and I kept getting good values at skill positions. I picked up Justin Fields and played him. I also picked up Geno Smith. And moving forward, I think Geno's probably going to be the guy that I try to get in my lineup. Obviously, he's still matchup dependent, but he's looked really solid for fantasy in real life. No Kenneth Walker in this one, so Zach Charbonnet got the start. 14 for 38 on the ground, not very efficient, but luckily he did get into the end zone on a rushing touchdown. DK Metcalf, I told you guys not to overreact to week 1 where he was matched up with Patrick Surtain. He was one of my guys, arguably my favorite pick at wide receiver. He saw 14 targets, caught 10 of them for 129 yards and a touchdown, 56-yard bomb. Love that. And then also super notable here is DK Metcalf had 14 targets, and he did not lead the team in targets. That was JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba. 16 targets, caught 12 of them for 117 yards. The breakout might be here. He was drafted high. Week 1, it looked like he was still the 3 with Tyler Lockett kind of appearing to be the wide receiver 2 there, but he really showed up and was Tyler Lockett. He was 2 of 15. I think he had like 1 catch for, I want to say negative yards before overtime, or very low yardage if I remember correctly. And Charbonnet did also add 5 for 31 in the passing game, which kind of, helped him out. So Geno was the quarterback 7. Zach Charbonnet got in the end zone, so he was able to finish as the running back 12 with 15.4 points in half PPR. So if you have, there's a guy in my dynasty league who has Jordan Mason, who that's painful for me for the reasons I explained, and he also has Zach Charbonnet. So he got 2 actual starters this week out of nowhere, and his only other running back was Bijan Robinson, who's great, but he was starting Charbonnet before he was the starter. Like, that was his next best option. So lucky for him. DK Metcalf finished as the wide receiver 2 on the week, 23.9 points in half PPR. And then Jackson Smith and Jigba, wide receiver 12 on the week with 17.7. Very encouraging for JSN managers. Hopefully you didn't trade him away in Dynasty or anything on the cheap, because it was looking a little bleak there, but good for him. And then on the other side, Jacoby Brissett of the Patriots, 149 and 1 through the air, 15 of 27. Let's see, 2 for 6 on the ground. Antonio Gibson alert here, 11 for 96 on the ground, added 1 catch on 1 target for 7 yards, but it did not come at the expense of Ramondre Stevenson, who was awesome again, back-to-back weeks. He had 21 carries for 81 yards, not super efficient, but 21 for 81 on the ground, had a rushing touchdown. Also saw 5 targets, only caught 2 for 9, but you love the 5 targets there. Gibson was the running back 24 on the week with 10.8 points in half PPR. And then Ramondre Stevenson was the running back 10 on the week with 16 points in half PPR. In the passing game, a little bit surprising here, Hunter Henry, 8 for 109, saw 12 targets. He usually has a couple solid games every year. He was a tight end 3 on the week with 14.9 points. Usually it's on the back of a 1 or 2 touchdown grabs where you're like, oh, whoa, streamer alert. But yeah, over 100 yards for Hunter Henry. Sheesh, he might be their number 1 target at this point. Jalen Polk, 3 targets, went 2 for 12 and a touchdown. Ramondre was second on the team in targets behind Henry with those 5 targets. And then KJ Osborne had 2 targets, 1 for 7. Austin Hooper, 1 for 5. Henry is perennially just a nice streaming option. With that receiving room being a little crowded, I thought maybe this was a year he wouldn't be super relevant, but he looks like he'll have his weeks. I'm sure he's going to have his disappointing weeks as well. Don't get me wrong, but moving on to the 49ers. No, not the 49ers. The Commanders, different team. Commanders and the Giants. Jaden Daniels, we'll start with the winning team. The Commanders and Jaden Daniels were able to narrowly get the win, 21-18. Not a good game for the offense, though. Jaden Daniels was a quarterback, 13.4 points in half PPR, 226 yards, no touchdowns, no picks, 10 for 44 on the ground, though. So kind of, made him all right. Not good, but helped. And then Brian Robinson, I made him a start of the week, and that definitely paid off. He was 17 for 133 on the ground, had 3 targets, only caught 1 for 3 yards, but 3 targets is pretty encouraging for a guy like Brian Robinson. Running back 16 on the week, 14.1 points. Definitely a guy that you can start a little bit moving forward in the right situation. Austin Eckler saw 8 carries, turned into 38 rushing yards. He also saw 3 targets, caught all 3 of them for 47 yards. He had 10 points in half PPR, was the running back 25 on the week. And then in the passing game, it was a little bit ugly. Ertz was their leading receiver, 4 for 62 on 4 targets. He's going to be a streaming option at tight end if you're desperate. Noah Brown was their leading wide receiver with 56 yards. Saw 3 targets, caught all 3 of them for 56 yards. Terry McLaurin, another disappointing game. He saw 8 targets and he caught 6 of them, but it only turned into 22 yards. And then Diami Brown, once they traded away Dotson, the whole discussion was, is it Diami Brown? Is it Noah Brown as the two? What's going on here? But at least in the near future, I don't think it's going to matter too much. I don't think you want to play any of those guys. I did drop Diami Brown after week 1 for Noah Brown in Dynasty. So that's a super deep league with like 30-man benches and taxi squads and all this. But for most redraft leagues, probably not going to matter. We really need to get Terry McLaurin going. Because I did trade, before the season, I traded Gus Edwards and Jacoby Myers as a package for Terry McLaurin, and they accepted it, and I was happy with it. But so far, none of those players have really done much, so maybe it's a wash. But yeah, let's get to the New York Giants side of the ball here. Daniel Jones. Well, actually, let me look at where Zach Ertz finished as tight end. He was a tight end 8 on the week, 4 for 62, and he was a tight end 8. That's amazing. For the Giants, Daniel Jones. I played him in some DraftKings, and he was not bad, dude. He was the quarterback 6 on the week. This is a much better matchup than my Vikings were, dude. 16 of 28, 178 through the air, a couple passing touchdowns, added 5 for 32 on the ground. Devin Singletary had a nice game. The Washington defense is just not good. So a lot of the, if there's any opportunities to like, oh yeah, Daniel Jones is good. I mean, no one's going to trade for Daniel Jones. What am I saying? Just pretend I didn't say anything, because no one's going to trade for Singletary, and I would not trade Malik Neighbors unless you're getting like the best player overall value. But anyways, Devin Singletary, 16 for 95 on the ground, had a rushing touchdown, 1 catch, 1 target, 0 yards. He was the wide running back 18 on the week with 14 points in half PPR. Then Malik Neighbors, I made him a start of the week. I told you guys, don't be scared. Malik Neighbors is great. The matchup in week 1 it didn't go their way. Their offense looked bad, but this was a much better matchup. And boy, oh boy, was I a fantasy football prodigy with that one. He had 18 targets. Daniel Jones only threw the ball 28 times. Over half the time, he threw it to Malik Neighbors. There were 10 times where he did not throw it to Malik Neighbors. That's crazy. 18 targets, went 10 for 127 yards and a touchdown. Wide receiver 3 on the week, 23.7 points. Unbelievable. He had a 4th down drop as well. So he really should have been like 11 for 130 something, which would have made him the wide receiver 2. Obviously, drops are part of the game. But other than that, only 3 other players caught a pass. Darius Slayton went 3 for 33 on 4 targets. Wan'Dale Robinson had 4 targets, caught 2 for 18 and a touchdown. And then Devin Singletary, like I said, he had that 1 target and caught it for 0 yards. So, yeah. Where you drafted Malik Neighbors, it's looking pretty good right now. And it was a little bit later than you had to draft Marvin Harrison, another rookie receiver. But we'll talk about him later, because I know you had to draft Harrison pretty early, but that might also have been a good pick. Chargers took on the Panthers in Carolina, not even close. Bryce Young was terrible. Chargers wiped the floor with them 26-3. Chargers are now 2-0. Panthers 0-2. Justin Herbert actually did better than I would have thought for fantasy. And he was the quarterback 23 with 12 points. He only threw the ball 20 times, was 14 of 20 for 130 yards, but he did have a couple passing touchdowns to Quentin Johnston, had 1 interception. But where I really thought they would thrive is on the ground, which is why I made J.K. Dobbins a start of the week. Hey, I was on with my starts of the week for week 2. J.K. Dobbins was the start of the week of mine. He was the running back 5 on the week with 19.6 points in half PPR, 17 for 131 on the ground and a touchdown. Caught his 1 target, but no yards. Gus Edwards, also, let's not forget about him. Like he had 1 more carry than Dobbins, only turned into 18 for 59. Dobbins is definitely the guy that you want here. And ironically enough, he looks like the guy that has the juice, even though he's had all those injuries. Dobbins, that is. But Gus Edwards is still going to be relevant. He just hasn't had any big plays and hasn't scored yet, and not really a pass catcher. But in certain situations, maybe worth dropping, but not someone to just drop. But 18 for 59, running back 39 on the week. So Herbert also added 18 yards on the ground, and then Hassan Haskins got in there, 3 for 11. Good for him. But back to the couple passing touchdowns there were in this game. Quentin Johnston, You know, he had a rough rookie year, and I don't think anyone is saying that he's going to be, you know, the next Larry Fitzgerald, but there was always the possibility that he was a little undervalued and overly criticized his rookie year. And, you know, it's good to see him have himself a nice performance here. You know, it's going to be hard to know which receiver to start each week just because this team wants to run the ball and play defense. But, you know, Johnson is going to be their big bodied jump ball type of receiver. He saw 6 targets, turned into 5 for 51 and 2 touchdowns. Wide receiver 9 on the week, 19.6 points. After that, there was no one you wanted to start. Will Dissly was their leading tight end, 3 for 29 on 3 targets. Ladd McConkey had 4 targets, only turned into 2 for 26. And Josh Palmer caught both of his targets for 19 yards. And then Hayden Hurst, 1 for 5. So no one you really want to start there. And, you know, Johnson had the good week. You know, if you're in a deeper league, you could probably throw any 3 of those guys in there, Johnson, McConkey, or Palmer. Palmer almost had a touchdown in week 1, I remember, but it's going to be hard to know who to play, and there's probably not going to be a lot of volume unless there's a game where it's a little more competitive. Because what did Justin Herbert do in week 1? Let me pull up his, because that game I remember was a little more competitive, and he threw the ball. Let's pull this up here. So he threw the ball 26 times in week 1 compared to 20 in week 2. So even there, it wasn't, you know, 26 passes isn't like high volume. For the Panthers, Bryce Young got benched after this game. I mean, you know, it's not looking like he's going to be good for fantasy. As a Panthers fan, you might say, like, you know, maybe play Bryce Young and have him lead you to the worst record and first overall pick. But Andy Dalton's going to go in there and be good for the team, be good for fantasy. So, you know, it's easy to say just tank, but what does that say about your coaching staff and your team? And like, people get kind of, you know, you might lose the locker room doing stuff like that. So it's hard to know what to do, but he was 18 of 26, 84 yards, no touchdowns, 1 pick, 1 for 6 on the ground, I guess, to make it somewhat. No, he's terrible. He was terrible. I don't even know why I'm trying to justify it. How many fantasy points did he have? I wasn't even going to look, but Bryce Young, he was the quarterback 33 on the week. There's 32 teams. Skylar Thompson, filling in for Tua at the end of the game, outscored him. Skylar had 3.6. Bryce Young had 3. That's crazy. I'm not trying to dunk on the guy, but it's just so apparent that it's like not going to work. Chuba Hubbard, 10 for 64 on the ground. Added 5 targets, caught 4 of them for 12 yards. So I talked about him before the season as someone you could throw in there as like a flex, 0 running back guy you could target. 9.6 points in half PPR. Running back 26 on the week. Definitely not as good as I was hoping. Just that offense just looks terrible. I think moving forward with Andy Dalton, Chuba might be a little bit better of a play than he has been, obviously. But Miles Sanders is also involved, and I did trade him away in Dynasty in a package where I got Matthew Stafford. So Matthew Stafford is losing all of his weapons and his offensive line. Miles Sanders is probably going to be a league winner somehow just because I traded him away. But 7 for 20 on the ground. 3 targets, caught him all for 5 yards. But yeah, in the receiving game, it was abysmal. The leading receiver was Tommy Tremble, who had 23 yards on 3 receptions, 4 targets. Adam Thielen had 3 targets, got 2 for 20. Deontay Johnson had 6 targets, turned into 3 for 15. Mingo got in there, had a couple targets, caught 1 for 1 yard. So yeah, new quarterback definitely was needed. As we move along here, please make sure to drop a like if you're watching on the YouTube, or make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you are listening. Next game, we got the Browns taking on the Jaguars. On the road, the Browns get the win in Jacksonville, 18-13. Deshaun Watson looked a little bit better than he did in week 1. Still not great, but, you know, it just wasn't abysmal. Deshaun Watson was the quarterback 11 on the week, actually. 22 of 34, 186 yards, no touchdowns, no picks, but 5 for 20 and a touchdown on the ground. Deontay Foreman actually led this team in carries, which is very surprising with Jerome Ford there, as, you know, he was another guy I highlighted as a nice 0 running back target until Chubb came back, but Foreman led the way with 14 carries, only turned into 42 yards. Had 1 catch on 1 target for 9 yards, but that'll be something to monitor moving forward. Like, was that just a one-off, or is Foreman the new starter? Ford was definitely better on a per touch efficiency basis. He was 7 for 64 on the ground, had a 36-yard run in there. Had 2 targets, caught 1 for 0 yards, but definitely a little bit odd. Jerry Jeudy was the leading receiver here. Maybe someone worth picking up on waivers. If you're in a deeper league, if he's out there, still not super bullish on him, but it's good to see he has a pulse. 6 targets, 5 for 73. Elijah Moore was actually the second leading receiver, 8 targets, caught 6 for 44. And then David Bell, 3 for 27 on 3 targets. You notice who I haven't said yet. Jerry Jeudy, he was the wide receiver 29 on the week, 9.8 points. And I'm moving down the list here, and we're finally getting to Amari Cooper. Saw 8 targets, only caught 3 of them for 11 yards. He's seeing a lot of targets, but whether it's Watson looking bad or Cooper just drop, he has a couple really bad drops, or if he catches 1 or 2 of them, we're looking at him completely different. But I want to say he's a buy low target just because of the targets and just how good we know he is. It's just hard to trust this offense, but if he would have just made a couple of those catches, I mean, we'd be super hyped about Amari Cooper. So the targets are there. Watson isn't good, but I think if you can get him for a really, really good value, he could be a nice buy low, but I would not go, offer wide receiver 1 or even like wide receiver 2 value for him, like not high wide receiver 2 value. But if someone is completely out on him and you can trade like some, random guy for him or a package of 2 guys you're never going to start, then sure. For the Jaguars, man, I just want this offense to be good, man. I remember in Dynasty, I took Lawrence in like the first round, I think, because I was so hyped about him. And it was a 1 quarterback league. I took him in the middle of the first, and just has not worked out. 14 of 30, 220 yards, no touchdowns, no picks for Trevor Lawrence. He had a 2 for 45 on the ground. Travis Etienne, 13 for 52 and a touchdown on the ground. He was running back 20 on the week. He also had a 3 for 6 through the air on 4 targets. Dearness Johnson was the backup there, got 5 for 26. And then Brian Thomas, another pretty okay game here for the rookie. 4 targets you don't love and only 2 receptions, but he's a big play guy. His 2 receptions turned into 94 yards. He had a 66-yard catch in there. So Brian Thomas was the wide receiver 27 on the week, 10.4 points on only 2 catches. But, if that's going to be his volume every week, you don't want to chase that. But so far through 2 weeks, he's shown that he has those skills and those traits to be a really good receiver. And I think the hope is that he sees more volume moving forward to just increase that floor and increase that consistency. But in Dynasty, I'm very excited about him. Second leading receiver with no Evan Ingram in this game after he was ruled out in pregame warmups. Brenton Strange, tight end, 3 for 65, saw 6 targets. A guy you could probably pick up off waivers in a deeper league, or if you're dealing with injuries at tight end, you need someone to play. As long as Ingram is out, 6 targets is solid. It probably won't work out most weeks, but I mean, where did he finish on the week here? Tight end 9, 8 points. Doesn't take a lot. Gabe Davis saw 7 targets, only turned into 3 for 43. And Christian Kirk, very concerning game. 3 targets, caught 1 for -1 yards. I'm not going to say that he's an outright drop, but if you're in like a 10-team league and there's someone out there that you're really confident in, I wouldn't like hate you for dropping Christian Kirk. This is 2 really bad weeks in a row. And it's especially concerning because there was no Evan Ingram, which, he operates in the middle of the field, which is where Christian Kirk kind of dominates. And still, targets weren't there. Last week, I believe he also only had 1 catch. That one went for 30 yards at least, but still 1 catch back-to-back weeks is very concerning. So, it's possible that they get it figured out and they get him involved. It's just weird to me that, he's been such a consistent quality player for a while now that they would just, turn away from him so aggressively, but very weird. Moving on to the next game, Raiders in Baltimore took down the Ravens 26-10, or sorry, 26-23. I keep saying things in my head that I don't mean to say. I've been talking for over an hour straight, so give me some slack here, but Raiders defeated the Ravens 26-23. Nobody saw this coming. I did not pick the Ravens in my survival pool though, so maybe I had some sort of feeling. I'll show you the survivor pool. Maybe we'll do a segment about that. Well, maybe we'll do that like in the preview of the upcoming week, maybe. But Minshew, 30 for 38, 276, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Yeah, I mean, Gardner's always been a guy that can go in there and be solid. He's a quarterback 17 on the week, probably only a 2 quarterback play, but you know, he's a solid little QB. And the running game is ugly for the Raiders, 9 for 24 on the ground for Zamir White. Did he add any? He had 4 targets, 3 for 14, but nothing there. And then Alexander Madison, a week after having that big touchdown catch, only 4 for 1 on the ground, but did have a rushing touchdown. Probably you want to avoid this backfield if you can, but if you're desperate to play them, they both might have some value. I mean, White saw the volume here, but it's just ugly. It's just an ugly situation. Devontae Adams, if I remember correctly, he didn't have the best start, but by the end of the game, he was 9 for 110 and 1 touchdown on 12 targets. That was good for wide receiver 6 on the week with 21.5 points. And Brock Bowers is someone who we really need to start looking at as maybe one of the best tight ends in fantasy. Rookie tight ends usually don't come out and perform. Obviously, Laporta did it last year, but Bowers is looking like he's going to be another tight end that really, really shows up. Week 1, he was the tight end 3. Week 2, he was a tight end 3. 8 for 58 in week 1. 8 targets, 6 for 58 in week 1. 9 targets, 9 for 98 in week 2. So the target volume is there, and he was a generational prospect coming out of college, like one of the best ever, if not the best. They had just spent a 2nd-round pick, I believe it was, on Michael Mayer at tight end the year before, but the team still said, no, we need Bowers. And I'm in a guillotine league, and Bowers hit the waiver wire or whatever you call it in a guillotine league. He was a free agent for the team that got chopped. And I'm like, I mean, I bid like, we have $1,000 and I bid over 10% by it. I think like 15-ish, 10 to 15-ish. I can't remember where I put it, but I might change it. But I'm very high on Brock Bowers, especially with a lot of those other top tight ends not looking great so far. And yeah, love the target volume. You know, the offense is a little concerning, but you know, they just put up 26 points on the Ravens, and you know, Gardner is capable. So, you know, maybe the offense isn't as big of a concern as we thought, and I think he might be just their number 2 target overall. Jacoby Myers, 5 targets, 4 for 29. He'll probably have some weeks moving forward where he has a game or 2 here or there, but not someone that's super relevant for fantasy. And then for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson, 21 of 34, 247 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, added 5 for 45 on the ground. You love that. Quarterback 9 on the week, 17.4 points, according to Fantasy Pro scoring here. I don't know what format they use. It doesn't say, but it's obviously league dependent, but I'm just going off of the default Fantasy Pro scoring. And Derrick Henry, I remember watching this game or like monitoring it, and it would tune in on Red Zone. And I'd be like, man, I feel like Henry should really be having a better game. But by the end of it, he did all right. 18 carries, 84 yards, and a touchdown. Like, you love that volume. He also had 1 target, caught it for 12 yards, was the running back 9 on the week, 16.1 points in half PPR. So far, so good for Henry. I think, you know, the days of him putting up like upper 100 yardage games and, you know, stuff like that and getting like 30 carries is probably over. But I traded for him in Dynasty. It was like a 2nd-round pick in Oshivas, who of course now Oshivas is out here catching touchdowns, but you know, he's gonna be a solid play for fantasy, and pass catching isn't probably gonna be there, but especially in game scripts where they're favored, gonna be good. This game was competitive, so he was able to run. I thought that they would be winning this game, but either way, Henry was involved, and Justice Hill was 4 for 22 on the ground. 2 for 10 through the air on 2 targets. So he was very involved in week 1. He might have some flex value in matchups where you think they're going to be trailing, but the Ravens are a good team, even though they are 0-2. So you're not going to project them to be trailing most weeks. So Hill is probably more of just like a really deep league player, maybe even like a kind of handcuff if something happened to Henry. But, you know, Keaton Mitchell will be coming off IR at some point as well. And then in the receiving game, Zay Flowers, he's a really fun player. I think if he was on a different offense with more consistent volume, he might be more interesting, but when he gets the ball in his hands, he's really shifty and fun to watch. 11 targets turned into 7 for 91 and 1 touchdown. Wide receiver 11 on the week, 18.6 points. And then Mark Andrews, definitely a better performance than week 1, where he was just a complete dud, but he was a tight end 11 on the week, 4 for 51 on 5 targets. Isaiah Likely definitely regressed. I told you guys not to overreact. Isaiah Likely, 21, was the tight end 21 on the week. 3 targets, 2 for 26. I mean, I told you guys not to overreact. Mark Andrews is still the number 1 tight end there. Don't overreact to one bad week. It's easy to overreact, especially in week 1. But I think Andrews is still a buy low. The only issue or concern I have with him is injury. It's like I said about Cooper Kupp. Like, Kupp has been great in the past. He still looks good. Week 1, he was amazing. Puka went on IR, and I said he's going to be a league winner as long as he stays healthy, and he gets hurt. And Andrews is kind of one of those guys that, he deals with injuries a lot. But if you can get him on the cheap, I mean, that might be something worth exploring. Rashad Bateman, 3 for 40 on 4 targets. That's really all that's relevant there. And hey, comment below, like, do you like me deep diving into all the players, or, do you want me to kind of just focus on like the top names? Because I'm kind of just looking at the box scores, and I do a little snap percentage, info for some things, but I guess I don't know. I think it's good to give you guys the full picture rather than give you too much info than too little. But next game we got here is the Cardinals destroying the Rams at home in Arizona, 41-10. Cardinals are now 1-1 after a tough battle with Buffalo too, and just destroying the Rams, who are now 0-2. I think this might be a lost season for the Rams, unfortunately. They lost Aaron Donald on defense, one of the best defenders of all time, but there was reason to think like they could be a playoff team, but they lost Puka Nacua. Now they lose Cooper Kupp. Their offensive line is just decimated. They have some defensive injuries. I mean, and I traded for Stafford in Dynasty, which means he's destined to have a rough year. But yeah, it's looking like a fantasy wasteland here. I mean, we'll start with the Cardinals. Kyler Murray, perfect quarterback rating, 158.3. I think I saw he was like the second player, or one of the only players ever to have 250 plus passing yards, 50 plus rushing yards, and a perfect passer rating. But he was 17 of 21 through the air, 266 yards, 3 touchdowns, added 5 for 59 on the ground. He was my guy at quarterback. Excuse me, pardon me. I am dealing with that cold, and I've been talking for over an hour. But yeah, definitely great game, and a guy you should be starting every week. I was a little concerned about the offense after week 1, but yeah, they definitely looked great and a little more creative in week 2. So this is more of what I was expecting. Obviously, 41 points isn't going to happen every week, but James Conner, another guy that I was super high on in draft season, 21 for 122 on the ground and a touchdown. Only had 1 catch for 2 yards on 1 target, but still, he finished as the running back 6 on the week with 18.9 points. And Kyler Murray was the quarterback 1 overall with 28.5 points. So awesome. Trey Benson got in there. So 11 carries turned into 10 yards. DeMarcado, another backup, only 2 carries, but had a long of 41. So it ended up being 2 for 46 yards. And this is what we're really, really concerned about here too, is Marvin Harrison Jr. Oh, he had 1 catch for 4 yards in his debut. He wasn't fast enough, yada, yada, yada. Listen, I get the concern, but there's people out there that benched Marvin Harrison. Hey, man, if you're spending that draft capital on Marvin Harrison, you need to know he's a rookie. It's not going to be perfect all the time. Don't overreact to one bad game. And people overreact to week 1 in particular way too strong. And he came out, and he was the wide receiver 1 on the week. Number 1 overall. He only had 4 catches, but he had 8 targets, went 4 for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. Just looked dominant. If it was a more competitive game, I'm sure you would have seen more volume, but wide receiver 1 on the week, the conversation is over. He should be in your lineup each and every week. If you sat him, shame on you. But at least now you know. Okay? And to be fair, there was reason to be concerned, but if you're drafting a guy that early, dude, like, I mean, unless you have a really, really good pivot option, like you're in like an 8-team league or something, then okay, maybe. But anyways, Trey McBride is looking like one of the better picks at tight end so far, a couple weeks into the season, along with Brock Bowers. But I have no shares of Bowers and only 1 share of McBride in my 6 leagues. Well, I'm in 5 real leagues, six if you count the guillotine league. But McBride was the tight end 2 on the week, 15.7 points in half PPR, 6 targets, caught all of them for 67 yards. And I was watching that game a little bit, and he's just a really fun player to watch. A lot of tight ends, they're kind of lumbering and like they catch it and they fall down, or if they don't get a touchdown, they're going to have like 20 yards or whatever. But he's a guy who, like, when he gets the ball in his hands, he looks like an athlete. Like, he can do stuff with the ball after the catch. So I love that in a tight end, where it doesn't always have to just be, possession catches. I hope he gets enough yardage through the air, and touchdowns. Like 6 for 67 is a good line for a tight end to just put up straight up. It was a tight end 2 on the week with 15.7 points. After those 2, it was pretty rough. Michael Wilson, 2 for 31 on 2 targets. Elijah Higgins caught a touchdown on his 1 target, 18 yards. And Greg Dortch, 2 for 11. Highlight Greg Dortch quick, just a quick preview upcoming. They're taking on the Lions, who give up the most points to slot receivers. Dortch wasn't needed in this one. I think he's still an okay deep league or daily play coming up, especially maybe like a cash game where you need like some secure PPR points. But he's pretty cheap on DraftKings, I saw. And Trey Benson also added a catch for 7 yards. But for the Rams, very abysmal. No Puka Nacua in this one, and Cooper Kupp left early. He was started by everyone, so that hurts. And I played him in every single one of my DraftKings lineups. I put him in, and I actually did pretty well still. But if he would have just played and just had like a okay line, like I think a disappointing line for Cooper Kupp would have been like, I don't know, 6 for 60 or whatever. And even that, I would have taken that. But Stafford, 19 for 27, 216 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. Just a terrible situation for him. It's hard to succeed with him losing his weapons and his O-line. Kyron Williams, 12 for 25 on the ground. Luckily, he did have a rushing touchdown. Blake Corum saw some work, 8 for 28 on the ground. Just because it was such a blowout, they had to, put the backup in. But Cooper Kupp finished with 4 for 37 on 6 targets before leaving with injury. So it was happening. Like, he got injured very early in that game and had already seen 6 targets. DeMarcus Robinson, 2 for 50 on 4 targets. Tutu Atwell, 3 for 48 on 4 targets. Jordan Whittington, young player, 2 targets, 2 for 22. Tyler Johnson, 3 targets, 2 for 20. These are guys that are going to be it. These are their top receivers. DeMarcus Robinson and Tyler Johnson are going to be relevant. Tutu Atwell flashed at times last year. Jordan Whittington is a young player who a lot of people were high on in training camp season. So who's going to emerge, if anyone? I'm not sure who's going to be the leader, but they're all going to be names to monitor and maybe worth picking up on waivers, some of them. And then Kobe Parkinson at tight end, only 2 targets, caught it for 12 yards, caught 1 for 12 yards. He was one of my favorite streaming options and DFS plays, and it just did not work out. And I went very heavy on the Rams, and fading the Rams and playing some Cardinals would have definitely been the move. Like, if you stacked Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison or McBride, or if you put Connor in there, you definitely were happy with that. Let's get this ugly game out of the way. Pittsburgh Steelers traveled to Denver, defeated the Broncos 13-6. The Broncos are 0-2. Steelers are 2-0. The Steelers are really good at winning really, really ugly games. Justin Fields, I started him in that league where I had Trevor Lawrence, and he just hasn't done it for fantasy, really. No big runs, not throwing it a ton. 13 of 20, 117, and 1 touchdown. Added 8 for 27 on the ground, but just hasn't really. The quarterback 24 on the week with 11-something points, so just not lighting it up like you would hope. But he's going to start in week 3, and as long as he's starting, he's someone that's worth monitoring just because he has that rushing ability. But at this point, he's being more of a game manager than anything. And they're 2-0. It's really on the back of the defense, but he hasn't made those crucial crushing mistakes like he would sometimes make in Chicago. Najee Harris was the running back 29 in half PPR with 7.9 points. 17 for 69 on the ground. Caught one pass on 2 targets for 5 yards. So this is classic Najee Harris, just very pedestrian, mediocre fantasy performances. But by the end of the year, he'll probably turn it on and be a league winner. This is usually what he does. And Jaylen Warren was actually a little involved this week. He was coming off that, I believe, hamstring injury before the season, but I'm sure he'll get more work as the year goes along. 9 for 42 on the ground. Caught both of his targets for 19 yards. Running back 33 on the week with 7.1 points. And Cordero Patterson, of course, was a little bit involved. 2 for 3 on the ground. Leading receiver was Pat Freiermuth. 4 targets. Caught him all for 39 yards. I made him a desperate start of the week. Didn't work out as much as you hoped. Just didn't get in the end zone. George Pickens, 4 targets, 2 for 29. Disappointing box score, but he's a really good player. He drew at least, I feel like he was drawing a lot of pass interference flags. I know he drew at least one, but in my head I remember like at least a couple. But he was getting downfield. I think he had a play called back. He was drawing PI. Like, he's a good player. If you can buy low on him, definitely do it. And Van Jefferson, 2 for 14. Calvin Austin, 1 for 6. Like this, Darnell Washington, 1 for 5 and a touchdown. Like, that receiving room is just gross. But and then for the Broncos, Bo Nix, 20 of 35, 246 yards, 2 picks. Had a really brutal red zone pick, I remember. Javonte Williams, only 11 for 17 on the ground. Just not what you want. And then to be fair, guys, Pat Freiermuth was the tight end 13 on the week. He was almost a tight end 1. If he caught the touchdown instead of his teammate, who was the tight end 12, Darnell Washington, that would have been such a good play. Dang it. But yeah, Javonte Williams, it's not looking good. Even if he's a good player, still the offense is dreadful. Luckily, he added 5 for 48 on the ground. So that made him the running back 27 with 9 points in half PPR, but not someone I'm looking to start. Jaleel McLaughlin got in there 3 for 6 on the ground. It's just an ugly looking offense right now. Bo Nix added 25 yards on the ground on 4 carries. Leading receiver was Josh Reynolds, 4 for 93 on 5 targets. Maybe like a deep league player, but nothing more. He was the wide receiver 24 on the week with 11.3. Cortland Sutton, 4 targets, turned into 1 for 26. Greg Dulcich had he had a couple drops, bad drops in this one. I'll call him Greg Dropsich now. 8 targets, which is amazing, but 3 for 16. And I don't know how that's going to progress moving forward if he's going to drop the ball, especially with a rookie quarterback who needs as much going for him as he can get. We only have 3 games left, guys. It was a busy slate. A lot going on. Obviously, there's no bye weeks yet, so got a lot of games to cover, and I want to cover them all. Kansas City Chiefs narrowly defeated the Bengals 26-25 at home. Chiefs are now 2-0. Bengals are 0-2. They won on a field goal. I was watching NFL Red Zone, and I was watching like the actual Red Zone thing, right? And then when there's only one game left, they want you to like go to your cable provider or whatever and watch the game. So I was on a walk and I had it on my phone, and I tried to switch to this game like on the NFL Sunday Ticket thing, and it wouldn't let me. And it said like I had to change my location I had to like set my location, which the setting it told me to change was already activated. And I was like, do I have to watch it on like Xfinity or like what? I'm like, I don't know if you guys know how expensive the NFL Sunday Ticket is, but I have a gripe with them messing that up because I actually missed the end of this game. But I saw the replay. They kicked the field goal. Controversial penalty kept the Chiefs in it, but that's another story. Patrick Mahomes, 18 of 25, 151 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. Kind of reminiscent of last year. It's not been great for fantasy yet. Quarterback 14 on the week with just under 15 points. He added 29 rushing yards, thankfully. Isaiah Pacheco looked great. 19 for 90 yards. In the passing game, he had 5 targets, caught them all for 21 yards. But he did suffer a fibula injury in this game. And, luckily he got a lot of production in there. Running back 19 on the week, 13.6 points. So he didn't get hurt and leave super early in that game, which is nice. But, moving forward, waiver wire wise, like I said, Carson Steele is going to be relevant. He was 7 for 24 on the ground. Samaje Perine, 1 for 3 through the air. So those guys might be relevant. I could see it being an ugly committee, especially with them signing Kareem Hunt, but Yeah, Rashee Rice looked great, 5 for 75 and a touchdown on 6 targets. He was a really good value in draft season, just with that looming suspension that looks like it's not coming anytime soon. But he was the wide receiver 17 on the week with 16 points. Justin Watson, 2 for 22. Xavier Worthy had a bit of a bust performance, 1 for 5 on the ground, 2 for 17 through the air. We just really need that volume to kind of go up, because he only saw 4 targets and 1 carry. Only had 3.2 points in fantasy. And then Travis Kelce, dude. What the heck? Not good. Not great. 1 for 5 on 3 targets. Had 1 carry for 1 yard. You're starting him, and you hope that vintage Kelce is still in there, but I mean, that's concerning. This was never possible for prime Kelce, and he's getting older. So if you have him, you're probably starting him. That's what I'll say. Joe Burrow on the other side, 23 of 36, 258, and 2 touchdowns. Finished as a quarterback 10 on the week, just over 17 points. Nice little bounce back from week 1. Zach Moss didn't have himself a huge game. Well, I guess he technically did catch a touchdown, so he finished okay for fantasy, but 12 of 34 on the ground, 1 of 13. Oh, I'm sorry. I just completely lied to you. He did not catch a touchdown. I was looking at his target column. He had 1 target. So, okay. Back to what I originally said. Zach Moss, not a great game for fantasy, but he's still the guy there. They take on Washington coming up. I think he's going to eat. He'll probably be a start of the week. Spoiler, make sure you subscribe and follow to catch that. But yeah, 5.2 points. That was a tough matchup. Chiefs have a good defense, but he's the clear lead guy there. Chase Brown, 4 for 31 on the ground. And yeah, in the receiving game, Mike Gesicki saw 9 targets, went 7 for 91. Definitely, one of those guys we're going to pick up to play in deeper leagues with the tight end position being gross. And he was a tight end 5 on the week with 12.6 points. And I'm sure he's going to be awful next week, just because that's what always happens. But Jermaine Burton had a 47-yard catch on 2 targets. Let's go. I think that guy has potential to be good down the road in Dynasty. Jamar Chase, 5 targets, only 4 for 35, though. I mean, yikes. It hasn't been a great start for him. Don't overreact. Don't bench him like you did Marvin Harrison, but 5.5 points and half PPR is not what you drafted him in the early first round for. Backup tight end Eric All Jr. also had 4 for 32 on 4 targets. Another tight end, Drew Sample, 3 for 28 on 3 targets. The tight ends took over this game. And then Andre Oshivas, I played him a lot in DFS in week 1. He did nothing. In week 2, I didn't play him anywhere, I don't think. He had 4 targets, only 2 catches for 7 yards, but they were both touchdowns. So, cool, dude. Cool, man. Love fantasy football. We're finally on to the Sunday night game. Houston Texans against the Chicago Bears. Their special teams went crazy. Like I showed you, that in that league where I overcame the James Cook, or the Alvin Kamara 40 burger, Kaimi Fairbairn put up, what was it? He put up, can I get to this score here, please? 19 points, and the Texans defense put up 15 points. So I ended up winning by 10, so I didn't need him to go off like that, but I think that's my only league. No, I'm in 2 leagues where they have kickers, but he's been carrying me. He's been great. But back to what actually matters, those skill position players. CJ Stroud, 23 of 36, 260 and 1. Nothing on the ground. He's not really a big runner. So CJ Stroud was quarterback 16 with 14.3 points. Joe Mixon did get hurt in this one. Finished 9 of 25. Had 5 targets, 3 for 25. He was looking really, really good for fantasy. And his injury isn't significant from what I heard, but I'm not sure if he's going to miss a game or not. So we'll see. Cam Akers got involved there, 7 for 32 on the ground. Daria Gumbawale is another name to monitor there, 2 for 3 on the ground. Tank Dell had 3 targets for 3 carries for 16 yards. But the real guy you wanted on offense here was Nico Collins, who's looking like a really locked-in wide receiver 1. 8 for 135 and 1 touchdown on 10 targets. He was the wide receiver 4 on the week with 23.5 points. He was looking like a steal. In the offseason, I had the opportunity to trade McCaffrey away for Nico Collins or Devontae Smith and like a pick or something. And I was like, you know what? I ended up trading for Tyreek Hill, like a different, like a Jalen Waddle and like a pick or something. And I'm just going to go all in with McCaffrey and Hill. And I probably would have been better off straight up just trading away McCaffrey at this point because Nico looks great. And Tyreek Hill lost his quarterback, so that's awesome. My dynasty team is cursed, which I'll show you one more thing with that at the end of this podcast. But Stephon Diggs came back down to earth, 6 targets, 4 for 37. I mentioned that he might be a good sell high target after that week 1 performance where, the usage was a little concerning, but he had the 2 touchdowns. He might have some weeks moving forward, but Nico Collins is the guy you want here. Dalton Schultz, 2 for 21 on 3 targets. Tank Dell, 1 catch for -3 yards. He did have those 3 carries for 16 yards, but hey man, like I said, it's going to be hard to know who's going to have their week here, but I think Nico is the one you really want. And then Caleb Williams, another rough performance here, 23 of 37, 174 yards, 2 interceptions. No Keenan Allen in this game, and Rome Odunze was a little banged up, but he did play. I made DJ Moore start of the week. He saw 10 targets, but only turned into 6 for 53, which is not what you hope for from start of the week. Rome Odunze, 5 targets, 2 for 33. And Cole Kmet, 4 for 27 on 5 targets. He out-targeted Gerald Everett, who saw 3 targets, caught 2 for 1 yard. So there's a bit of a tight end committee there with the rookie quarterback play not being great. It's a little rough. I'm considering trading away DJ Moore in Dynasty to a team that's rebuilding for someone who's going to help me more now. More of like a veteran who, I know is going to actually like get good targets from a... I'm not giving up on Caleb Williams. I think he could be a good quarterback, but rookie quarterbacks just often aren't good for receivers in fantasy. It's just the truth. Caleb Williams did add 44 yards on the ground, which did salvage his day a little bit. He was still, the quarterback 29 on the week with 9.5 points. DeAndre Swift, this isn't Philly no more, dude. You don't have that offensive line. 14 of 18 on the ground. Added 4 for 24 through the air, but he was running back 37 on the week. Yeah, he doesn't look great. And then we're going to move on to the final game of this big NFL weekend. Atlanta Falcons, Philadelphia Eagles. What a crazy game. I don't think anyone saw it going this way, but Kirk Cousins and that offense, after how bad they looked in week 1 against the Steelers, they still didn't look great, but they looked better. And they put together a drive when they needed it. The Eagles ended up losing at home 22-21. Crazy end of that game. Eagles were in the red zone, close to the goal line. It was 3rd down. They're running the ball like crazy with Saquon, and they elect to pass it. They throw it to Saquon in the flat. Should have been a catch, should have been a touchdown or a fall over at the 1. And he dropped the ball, and that stopped the clock. It really kept the Falcons alive. The Eagles kicked the field goal. Falcons are down 6. They get the ball back, and they just drive down the field, throw a game-winning touchdown to Drake London. And London gets a penalty for pretending to shoot a gun in the air, which I didn't know that was I didn't really know that was a penalty. I understand like shooting someone should be a penalty, like pretending to shoot someone, but he didn't really direct it at anyone. It was basically on a sideline. I don't know. I thought that was kind of weak, but they made the extra point super long, like 48 yards or something. And of course, Young Waku just nailed it. But I do have to show you guys, and if you're on the YouTube, you can see the video, but I'll try to explain it for the audio only listeners as well. This was my matchup in Dynasty. No McCaffrey. This is the league where, I traded away Debo for Claypool. I dropped Mostert. I dropped Jordan Mason. I have a whole list of players I've dropped. I dropped Rico Dowdle before the season, who hasn't looked great yet, but he probably will at some point. I've just done a lot of stupid things. I actually dropped Mike Gesicki at one point, who had himself a heck of a game. Traded James Conner for James Robinson. I traded Tony Pollard away for a 3rd-round pick. I have a list right here. I drafted Kelvin Harmon over Terry McLaurin. Like, I made some bad decisions in this league, but we're still contenders. I went up against James Cook on Thursday night, and I was still in it. And with all those crazy circumstances that happened in that game, I took the lead on the Drake London touchdown. I'm winning. I won. The Eagles get the ball back. And what does Jalen Hurts do immediately? Here you go, Falcons. Interception. I lose 2 points. And and I lose the matchup. So I was winning, and then he threw that interception, and I lost 102.12 to 123.02. I lost by 0.9 points. Kyle Pitts kind of screwed me over. You know, if I would have played Dallas Goedert, I would have won, right? Yeah, not that he had a good game, but you know, I had to play Ezekiel Elliott because, you know, like a lot of my depth pieces are looking really rough. No McCaffrey, but yeah, that was definitely a brutal loss. So if you guys are, if anyone else lost on that Hurts interception, please let me know. Like, I would love to share my pain with some people. I know probably a lot of people did out there, just because there's probably a lot of close matchups, and every league that has Hurts, he's being started. So I'm sure it happened to some other people too. But Hurts was still good for fantasy. Let's talk about the Falcons first, because they actually won the game. Kirk Cousins looked better. I did watch this entire game, and he looked a lot better. Quarterback 8 on the week. Eagles defense looks terrible. Like, this was a much better matchup than the Steelers, but the Eagles are not a good defense. I saw this stat that they haven't had an edge rusher hasn't had a sack for the Eagles in like 6 games going back to last year. That's unbelievable. But Kirk Cousins had 17.5 points, was a quarterback 8, 20 of 29, 241 yards and 2 touchdowns. Luckily, he got the ball. He shouldn't have gotten the ball back, but he did get it back and led that touchdown drive. Bijan Robinson looked incredible too. I mean, just watching him run is so much fun. 14 for 97 on the ground, added 4 for 25 through the air on 5 targets. I mean, he's a candidate to be the 1-1 next year. Probably should be. He was the running back 15 on the week, 14.2 points, but he just looked phenomenal. Tyler Algier, 9 for 53 on the ground, added 1 catch on 1 target for 12 yards. And then leading receiver was Darnell Mooney, had a big 41-yard touchdown. Was 3 for 88 and 1 touchdown through the air. Someone that I highlighted as like when I did my draft recaps in the draft season, I drafted him late in some leagues. I haven't played him yet anywhere, but he was a wide receiver 16 on the week, 16.3 points, and he would have had a bad week without that long bomb, but that is in his repertoire. And in deeper leagues or DraftKings, he's worth monitoring. Then Drake London, 6 for 54 and a touchdown, saw 7 targets. He was the wide receiver 18 on the week, 14.4 points. So, you know, luckily he did get in the end zone there, and it hasn't been as good as we hoped for fantasy, but I think there were flashes from this offense that lead me to believe it could be better moving forward. And then Kyle Pitts, 3 for 20 on 4 targets, definitely disappointing. And then the last team that we're going to talk about here, the Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts was the quarterback 2 on the week, only behind Kyler Murray, and of course ahead of Derek Carr. Obviously, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Jalen Hurts, 24.8 points. Quarterback 2. He was 23 of 30, 183 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. He did add 13 for 85 and a touchdown on the ground. I traded for him in Dynasty, and that's why I did that. I got a really good deal for him. I've talked about that before, but I pretty much stole him. But Saquon, 22 for 95 on the ground. He looked really good. Added 4 for 21 on 5 targets. The only target he didn't catch was the one that he literally just dropped to lose the game. Devontae Smith, 7 for 76 and a touchdown on 10 targets. He's a guy you play every week anyways, but AJ Brown did miss this game. Superstar wide receiver. So Devontae Smith usually steps up in that situation as the one, and he really did do that. He was a wide receiver 14 on the week with 17.1 points in half PPR, 7 for 76 and a touchdown. Dallas Goedert didn't do what you would have hoped with no AJ Brown. 4 targets, 3 for 38. And then just a deep league guy to monitor if AJ Brown misses more time. Britton Covey saw 6 targets, only turned into 6 for 23. But I remember watching that game thinking, like, who is this guy that keeps catching all these little dump offs? And, you know, he had a long of 9 on 6 catches, but he had 6 targets, caught them all. He could probably do worse in like a, super deep league. And then Jahan Dotson, newly acquired guy with no AJ Brown. I played him in some DraftKings, but he was only 1 for 6 on 1 target. So, yeah. Hey, those are all the games. We did it, ladies and gentlemen. We talked about every single game. And there go the sirens outside my window. I don't know if you hear them, but yeah, those are all the games. We went over some of the crazy things that happened in my leagues in real life. Yeah, make sure you get your waivers in. Like, those Rams receivers are going to be guys to monitor. Jerry Jeudy might be worth a pickup. If Rico Dowdle is out there, I've seen him in some leagues. The Chiefs guys, those running backs, P. Ryan, Steele, and Kareem Hunt. I mentioned Ty Chandler. If you need a tight end, Hunter Henry had a nice little week there. Zach Ertz might be a deep play. And Gesicki had a good week. I don't know if he's going to keep doing that, but especially if Higgins remains out, that just increases the likelihood that he's relevant. Colby Parkinson had a bad week, but he might bounce back. Those are kind of the main guys. Braylon Allen as a handcuff if he's out there. Monitor the Houston situation with Cam Akers and Joe Mixon and all that. And Deontay Foreman, he could be the starter, the lead carry getter for the Browns if week 2 trends continue. And then, of course, Quentin Johnston, like I mentioned, like he's someone that might be worth picking up, but I wouldn't spend too much on him. Josh Downs is coming back for the Colts pretty soon. I mentioned Jawan Jennings. He's going to be more involved with Debo out and CMC out. Jalen Tolbert saw targets for the Cowboys. Tyler Johnson is another one of those Rams guys, if I mentioned it. It's like him, Demarcus Robinson, Whittington, and maybe even Tutu Atwell. I'd probably go Robinson, Tyler Johnson, Whittington, and then Tutu. But yeah, they might just kind of cannibalize each other. But I think those are all the main guys to target. And obviously at quarterback, if Derek Carr is still out there, he's worth picking up. He gets a matchup with the Eagles. Sam Darnold looks pretty good, but he might have lost a lot of his weapons. We'll see kind of how, Addison and Jefferson look heading into the week. Geno Smith, like I mentioned, I picked him up. I'm probably going to rely on him, either him or Justin Fields this week, who are both guys you could pick up. And those are the main guys. All right. Thank you guys for listening. I really do appreciate it. Make sure to drop a like if you're on the YouTube. Make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you're watching. This was a long episode. Let me know if there's anything I can do to kind of cut down on that moving forward. But if you want the long episodes, I'm here for it. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Good luck in week 3. And thank you for listening. I'll see you guys in the next one so you can become a fantasy football prodigy. Peace out.